Hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to this evening's Facebook Live at Breast Cancer Now. My name's Jane. I'm one of the nurses here. And this evening's session, we're going to be talking about two subjects, but kind of interlinked to a certain degree. So that's peripheral neuropathy and fatigue related to breast cancer treatment and breast cancer. I'm delighted to be joined by John, who's Senior Lecturer in Sports and Exercise Science, and Rosie, who's PhD candidate at the Department of Sport and Exercise and Rehabilitation from Northumbria University. Um, as you may or may not know, we try and answer as many questions as we can as we go along. John and Rosie will introduce themselves, talk a little bit about the subjects, and welcome any questions. Anything that we don't get to reply to this evening, we'll post replies to tomorrow. Don't forget, helpline is open from 9 o'clock tomorrow, but you're very welcome to leave a message on a voicemail overnight. The telephone number for that is 0808 800 6000. And the other thing to mention is we will post a link to a survey. We're really interested in hearing your feedback, any thoughts, suggestions, improvements. Um, yeah, that's always really helpful for us to develop this service. So without further ado, probably the best thing for me to do would be to hand over firstly to John and then to Rosie, who will introduce themselves and talk a little bit about, like I say, fatigue and peripheral neuropathy. And then we've already had a few questions in already, so we'll get cracking with those. So, John, shall I hand over to you first?
Thank you very much, Jane. So yes, my name's John. I'm an academic at Northumbria University in the Department of Sport, Exercise, and Rehabilitation. And one of my interests is cancer and exercise, specifically how it relates to symptoms such as peripheral neuropathy and fatigue. So when we talk about fatigue, this is kind of a very vague terminology gets thrown around a lot. But in the context of cancer, we're usually talking about a distressing, persistent sense of physical or emotional or cognitive tiredness or exhaustion that is not proportional to recent physical activity or other activities, and it interferes with usual functioning. So it's important we talk about fatigue in the context of cancer because this is one of the most common symptoms of cancer treatments, regardless of cancer treatments, chemotherapy, surgery as well, radiotherapy, etc. Um, Many of you will have talked with your doctors, and you may have mentioned, "Oh, I feel fatigued. What can I do about it?" Unfortunately, a lot of doctors don't want to talk about this because it is not a simple a simple problem. Fatigue is very multifaceted. There are a lot of factors that go into it. Some of them are physical, related to strength and endurance and cardiovascular fitness. Some of them are related to your immune response and things like that. Some of them are psychological. Some of them are social. Social interactions, the positive reinforcement you get from your support network. Others are related to sleep and your appetite. So there are many factors that go into cancer-related fatigue, and everyone's situation will be slightly different. There's no one size fits all. But as hopefully as we get into, exercise is good for managing your fatigue. I'll
Brilliant.
pass on to Rosie Redford.
Yeah.
Thank you. Over to
Um,
you, Rosie.
Thanks,
You're
Jane. So, yeah, my name is Rosie, and I'm a PhD candidate here at Northumbria in the Department of Sports, Exercise and Rehabilitation. So, my research focuses on trying to reduce the side effects from chemotherapy, specifically looking at chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy, as well as fatigue, and then also increasing quality of life when going through chemotherapy for breast cancer. Um, so I'm just going to do a little bit of an introduction to what peripheral neuropathy is. I specifically look at chemotherapy-induced peripheral neuropathy. That is caused by a number of different chemotherapies. My research focuses on taxanes, but it's also can be caused by some platinum-based compounds as well as finger alkaloids, so things like vinblastine. And the way that neuropathy works is that the chemotherapy can, in kind of helping with cancer, it can cause some systemic damage to the nerves, and specifically in the periphery, so hence the peripheral neuropathy. So fingers and toes, and it follows what's like a stocking glove shape. So the intensity is at the most at the fingertips and toes, and the most common symptoms are often sensory, so things like numbness and tingling, and some pain or sensitivity to pain, as well as either loss of sensitivity to temperature or an increased sensitivity to temperature as well. There are also some motor symptoms, and you get some balance issues and weakness. So often people say that they can't kind of do up the buttons in their jacket like they used to be able to, or experience some cramping in the periphery. And in a similar way to fatigue, neuropathy is a really complex issue. And as I just described there are so many different symptoms. So it might not be that you recognize the kind of obvious symptoms straight away. And there aren't a massive amount of treatment options out there. So that's why we're looking in this research about looking at the potential effect of exercise on peripheral neuropathy, and looking at exercising during chemotherapy and seeing how that can potentially prevent peripheral neuropathy. Because it's just like fatigue, it's experienced by many people who go through cancer treatment, and it can also continue for a while after cancer treatment has finished as well.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's as you both said, it's quite complex. Both of these things can really impact on somebody's quality of life, and it can be hard to, especially if somebody's having treatment for primary cancer. It can be difficult to move on when you're still struggling with the side effects of treatment. And obviously, there are some people that are having ongoing treatment for secondary breast cancer. So, not only are they living with that ongoing treatment and that diagnosis, the ongoing side effects as well. So I think it is really interesting, and anything that you can do in terms of research to find out more about it and understand how it, like you say, develops and what might help is brilliant. It might be if we perhaps go with the fatigue first, John. So it's something that we do hear a lot about on our helpline at Breast Cancer Now. We've had some questions in already, and I think what a lot of people find is the frustration about people's lack of understanding of fatigue. They might say to people about how tired they are, and often a standard response is, "Well, yeah, I'm really tired as well." And it's like this is a whole different level, isn't it, when we're talking about fatigue?
Yeah, it is a very different level. One thing that I said was it was disproportionate to the amount of activity that someone was doing.
Mm,
So I think that's something that gets missed. Yes, if you climb a flight of stairs, if you're working all day, if you go to the grocery store, things like that, these things will affect you. You might feel a little tired, like if you're not experienced fatigue from cancer, yeah, it might take a bit out of you. You might take a little rest after a while. But for someone with cancer related fatigue, it's going to be so much more. That flight of stairs will suddenly feel like it's two or three flight of stairs, not just one.
mm,
So I think that's something that people who aren't in that situation often can't really empathize with because they don't quite understand how disproportionate it can be. And I think one of the things that does make the fatigue challenging across the cancer journey, whether that's when people are on treatment or after treatment, and it could be even more accentuated after treatment because people are like in some ways because after someone's finished treatment, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, you're cured. There's no,
mm.
you're good to go.
Back
You
to
should be back to
normal. Yeah, back
normal."
to yeah.
Exactly, and fatigue can continue just like other symptoms of cancer, like Rosie Red mentioned, the peripheral neuropathy. Fatigue can continue for years after treatment has ended. And I think that's something that can be quite difficult for others who aren't similarly affected to understand. Oh, well, you finished your chemotherapy, your radiotherapy 3 years ago. Why are you still feeling fatigue now? And there are definitely people, thankfully, over time, the number decreases, but there are people 3, 4, 5 years down the line who are feeling fatigue, and it is
Mm.
causing a detrimental effect on their lives. So it definitely is a real problem for some people.
Yeah, and I think you've probably answered. So Sharon came in with a question about asking if it's normal to feel fatigue 3 years after treatment has finished, and what you're saying is it can be for some people.
Yes, definitely. It definitely can for some people. It can be definitely longer than 3 years. The good news is that there is quite a large amount of evidence that what well there's evidence there's quite a substantial body of evidence that exercise is good um, in terms of combating fatigue. I mean, it won't just eliminate it, but in reducing the fatigue, whether people are on treatment and after treatment. So that's the good news. And one of the things um, about um, about exercise is it's some of those areas when I was talking about the multifaceted aspect of fatigue. Exercise kind of addresses a number of those. So there was a recent study that was looking at a walking intervention for people with cancer related fatigue um, after they completed their treatment, and they didn't directly attribute the improvements in fatigue specifically to the walking, but they attributed it to things such as increases in muscle strength, better sleep quality, reduced psychological distress. So all those aspects. They were attributing to why people were feeling less fatigue, not specifically that it was walking, but
Mm,
all these
mm,
other aspects. It was touching on many of the contributing factors, and collectively, they were suggesting that these are making a difference.
okay. And when you talk about exercise, you've given the example of walking there. So we're not talking about gym necessarily doing massive gym sessions or running it can be very what sort of physical activity or exercise has been found to be or what level, what amount would you say has been found to have some benefit?
Well, I think we have to keep in mind that everyone is different,
Yeah.
um, and everyone needs to approach it from their symptoms. I think symptoms really need to guide it. That
Mm,
said, um, there's evidence that suggests that don't be scared
mm,
to do it. There is some evidence that if you do a bit more, you might actually have greater benefit. You might have less
mm,
fatigue than if you only do a little bit. There's a lot of evidence for aerobic exercise, walking, cycling,
mm.
depending on someone's fitness level, running,
Yeah.
swimming, whatever it is. There's also evidence for resistance exercise, going to the gym and lifting weights.
Mm,
Combination of that. There's some evidence for other types of movement based activities as well. But the thing is, it needs to be it should be something that someone feels comfortable doing.
mm,
If you haven't exercised before, and there are
yeah.
many people who haven't exercised
Mm,
before, we understand that you're not suddenly going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do exercise this many times a week for
mm,
this long. Well, no, that is a huge change in some people's lifestyle, and it's not going to be something that you can just turn a switch overnight. So it might be figuring out what you like to do.
mm,
Maybe someone likes going to the beach and playing around in the water, so it might be like, well, maybe I'll try out the local swimming pool. That might work for me because I enjoy that type of environment. But I know I hate walking places, right?
mm,
So for that person, walking wouldn't be an appropriate thing to do. It doesn't even have to be something quite as structured. I mean, there are some people who have young grandchildren and or young kids, depending on the age of the person, and they might
mm,
really love doing things and
mm,
playing with them and like going to the park with them.
mm,
And doing whatever they can. I mean, young children can entertain themselves quite nicely. So it can be like, okay, that's enough for me. I'll let my children or grandchildren continue playing by themselves because I've had enough. So it could be even easily incorporated into one's daily life like that.
Yeah, so it's like you said, it's something that everybody can hopefully find something that works for them, and it's not prescriptive. It's not, so
I, I
sort of,
think I think
yeah.
I think the word exercise can send some people running for the doors. Um, well, no, I mean the word exercise. I know Rosie Red and we have an
Yeah,
interest in this area. We
yeah,
do research in this area. We're passionate about it, but not everyone is. So I think the idea of moving more,
Mm,
the
mm,
idea of doing something, it could be a structured exercise session. I use the example of going to the park with young kids or
mm,
grandchildren.
mm,
So gardening, uh,
mm,
types of physical activity, increasing the amount of physical activity someone does, um,
mm.
I think is important rather than using the word exercise. You have to do
Yeah,
this many minutes,
yeah,
this intensity.
yeah. Definitely, definitely. That's really interesting, John. Thank you. And what I might do is come to you, Rosie, because we've had
yeah,
a few questions in about peripheral neuropathy,
yeah.
and two are kind of linked in a way. So there's one from Amy and one from Valerie. So
Mhm.
Amy's had um, she feels that she's got neuropathy, but it's only
Mhm.
in one hand. All five fingers and hand is numb.
Yeah,
Um, she feels like nobody's listening to her. So I think she's been to the oncologist who sent her to the GP. GP's gone back to the oncologist, and she's asking if it's possible to have neuropathy on in just one hand. And actually, Valerie has said she's been on. I'm 6 months after taxanes and peripheral neuropathy persists, especially in one foot. So
yeah.
there's one question: is it possible to have it in just one side?
Yeah. Well, something that I suppose I can't answer that completely, considering there's been conversations with kind of
Yeah, yeah,
clinicians
yeah. But it's
on this.
yeah, yeah,
It's
sure.
something that we've observed just kind of from observations from our participants who have experienced neuropathy. It's definitely common to have it more severe in one side. There's often that there is a higher kind of we have certain assessments that we do that measure someone's level of kind of sensory changes. So we do often see that actually there might be a real severe loss of feeling in one side, and then the other side might have retained some. So I can completely see that that would be something that could also be almost no neuropathy on one side, and then some on the
Mm,
other, and I think kind of following on from what John said, the really difficult thing with neuropathy, like fatigue, is it can be really debilitating, and it can last for it can last for a significant amount of time for some people, and there is this unfortunate kind of bouncing between people because there isn't something
mm,
really in a kind of easy fix for it. And something that there is some evidence for again is for exercise, and this kind of carries on nicely from the conversation we just had, that actually exercise either during or after treatment can help with neuropathy symptoms. There's potentially some kind of prevention or protectiveness there when you're going through chemotherapy, and then afterwards it helps with relieving those symptoms in the long term. So um, a good thing to do is to take that conversation we've just had about all the
mm.
different types of exercise that can be done. I mean, within the studies that we do quite structured exercise, but as you mentioned before, those kind of symptoms can potentially be helped by doing a wide range of exercises, anything that really works for
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that a lot of people are asking, probably about both of these things, and again, it's a bit like how long's a piece of string, is how long does it last? How long does it go on for? And Valerie's who's got it in one foot, has said she's 6 months post after a taxane, and she's assuming it's now permanent, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, no. So the percentage of people that will be still experiencing symptoms from immediately after to 3 months to 6 months to a year, and then up to 3 years, the percentage of people that continually experience symptoms does decrease kind of drastically. So it probably is is quite common to be having it 6 months after treatment. We see our participants 6 months and they're following their treatment, and actually they might not have presented with any neuropathy symptoms throughout and just after their treatment, but actually kind of a month or so afterwards they started to develop the symptoms, and then 6 months later they're still there. So it doesn't at all mean that it's permanent.
No.
It's just really really hard to predict how those symptoms are going to go, which is the hardest thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in Paula's message, she's saying that her feet and hands, she's described them as not working properly, but her feet get very hot. So is that something that would be associated with the neuropathy as well?
Yeah, yeah. So a sensitivity to temperature, or the opposite, which is a kind of a lack of sensitivity to temperature. So a kind of simplistic way of thinking about it is the neuropathy can damage the nerves so that they're either underfiring in some way or they're kind of overfiring. So that's why you get a tingling and a sensation, or a
Mm,
numbness. So you've got a sensation when it wouldn't normally be there, or no sensation when you should have sensation there. So um, it is very, yeah, that would be a common kind of presentation, and some people
mm,
have the opposite as well, where they things like their hands are always really cold, or they can't put their hands in freezers and grab their food out. So yeah, unfortunately that increased sensitivity to temperature, or increased feeling of heat or cold, yeah,
mm.
is quite common.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully that's answered that for you, Paula. And quite a few people, it might be that this is something that we have kind of mentioned in your uh, uh, answer just recently, John, is that people are asking if there is anywhere they could find exercises that they can be doing to help with neuropathy and fatigue. But I think as we've said, there's not really anything specific. It's about what fits in with somebody's lifestyle, what they enjoy doing. You're much better off doing finding something that you enjoy because you'll stick with it, or you might do it more often than, like you say, doing things that you're really not like pushing yourself through exercise that you're really not interested in.
Yeah, I think it. You can't really think about it like if you get an injury, you might go to a physiotherapist for
Yeah.
very specific strengthening exercises because of your specific injury. Things like fatigue and peripheral neuropathy, they don't really, exercise doesn't work in the same way. Um, Obviously, if you know that you have, I guess, like one of the things that is kind of important is if you know you have very poor cardiovascular fitness. If you know that your legs are very weak, we use our legs. Most people use their legs a lot walking, climbing stairs, everything they do moving around. Most people will be using their legs a lot. Obviously, some people are in wheelchairs and that may not apply to them, but for the vast majority of us, we do. So, I mean, if someone has weak legs, strengthening those legs will definitely be of benefit because every time you climb a stair, you're lifting your whole body weight up that stair. And then the next stair, you're lifting your whole body weight as well. By having stronger legs, it doesn't feel like you're lifting quite as much, which may help in terms of feeling less fatigue. Similarly, in terms of cardiovascular fitness, walking to the store, if you're operating at a high percentage of your maximum capacity, well, that's not good. You don't want your appliances running pretty much at maximum all the time. It'll wear them out. Similar thing with our body. If you have more reserve, you can tap into. Um, you can be doing things at a moderate intensity or a light intensity rather than a high intensity all the time, and you are more likely to feel less fatigue because of that. So I mean,
Mm,
so th- yeah, absolutely. There isn't a one size fits all, but if you know you have some areas to improve upon that might because you're particularly have a problem in one area, that might help give an idea of, well, about where you might get the best benefit for the least investment.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And
Um,
I think that actually leads quite in nicely. Maybe Rosie Red would like to talk about the study we're doing,
Yeah.
um, because we understand that, like as I said before, people are not just going to start exercising, and I think it would be good to hear a bit about the rationale behind a study we currently are running up here in the northeast of England.
Yeah, yeah. So, as John mentioned, while kind of, and specifically while receiving chemotherapy, finding that the time and energy to keep up with a regular exercise regime is really challenging. There's a lot of side effects that come along with chemotherapy, and fatigue being one of them. Um, so we wanted to think about how to make the most of completing every exercise session, and there is a kind of two parts of this rationale of the study. So there are some underlying mechanisms that may mean that doing a small amount of aerobic exercise just before specifically taxane chemotherapy in this case could be protective of the nerves. So there are a few different mechanisms behind that, but we wanted to see if that would kind of, although we understand these potential underlying mechanisms, we wanted to see if that would actually be possible, and if it would actually be feasible to do that as well. So we also thought about kind of using this exercise just before chemotherapy is the right time to do it. As we're aware, chemotherapy side effects come in cycles, so they may be the most intense a few days after chemotherapy and then slowly decrease. And we wanted to use that as it kind of to our advantage in kind of getting the most out of exercise by having our participants come in just before chemotherapy when hopefully the side effects, including that fatigue, are at their lowest, but also we can harness some of these mechanisms that we think may go on just before the chemotherapy, and then give a little bit of a protective boost to the nerves if possible. So that was our rationale, but then this is kind of one of the first types of studies looking at this kind of structure of exercise and this kind of use of exercise. So our study originally, and what we're doing right now, is more looking at how feasible this is. We completely understand that there is so much going on in everyone's lives, and so this very kind of structured timing of exercise just the day before might not work for our participants coming in, but also for the NHS and for everyone involved. So our study was really looking at how feasible this would be, but also how acceptable would it be for people? How would they feel about coming in and performing this exercise at this time point? And then we wanted to get some really early data on whether or not this is actually effective at protecting the nerves. And we also had loads of other measures like fatigue and quality of life and things like that. So we're currently looking at the results that we've got from some of our participants, and then we're also kind of hopefully planning a larger trial to look more, not necessarily at the feasibility, because we've done this in our trial now, but more at the how effective this would actually be at preventing the nerve damage and preventing the peripheral neuropathy symptoms.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? Fascinating. So, yeah, good luck with that. It'll be interesting to see. I know it'll be a while off, but it'll be interesting to see those results. And in terms of reducing the risk of things like peripheral neuropathies, is there, because I know there's been sort of like with the scalp cooling to reduce hair loss, we get asked sometimes about sort of the cold mittens and the cold boots. What's kind of the thoughts around that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're not currently routinely used
No.
in the UK. I know I've had a couple of people who were potentially going to be involved in our research who weren't, because they had decided to kind of on their own pursue the cold gloves in particular, I
Mm,
believe. I don't know, I haven't got a kind of huge amount of knowledge on the actual efficacy of these methods. I just do know
yeah.
that they're not like routinely used at
No,
the
they're
moment.
not. That's
And
right.
obviously, in a similar way to the cold capping, it's going to be, I would say, kind of if that was a route to go down, just to kind of look at the evidence,
The
something I guess
evidence.
Jane can kind of have a look at afterwards. But yeah, it will be another process to add on to that chemotherapy as well, I guess, would be a
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And we've had a question in from Becca, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this one. So sorry if I'm putting you on the spot a bit, but she's explaining how horrible her neuropathy is in her feet,
Mm,
and she was actually told that it was Raynaud's.
mm,
She said they thought that I had. I wonder if the Raynaud's they thought I had isn't actually that, and it's neuropathy
mm.
in my hands too, and not just my feet. Could these be confused with each other? As I'd never had any of these issues before chemo. I guess that's one for the doctors, isn't it, really? Just to sort of you're
Yeah,
not gonna know whether it's one or the other, only they can confirm, like a medical their doctors can confirm that.
yeah,
Um,
definitely,
but it's
definitely.
certainly worth an ask, Becca. It's certainly going back to if you're still under the care of your treatment team or if not, then your GP. Because obviously there's various referral routes they can suggest if it is Raynaud's or if it is peripheral neuropathy from your chemotherapy. Um, and what about sort of treatment in terms of other things that might help with sort of because I know there's been sort of studies and there's not have you got much information about any of the sort of drug related
For neuropathy,
for
I
neuropathy? Yeah.
believe there's one. Um, I think it's the duloxetine. I think is a drug option. That is the one that's kind of recommended. And there is a small amount of evidence. I believe that's actually an antidepressant that is prescribed for neuropathy. But I think it is unfortunate that there's not anything kind of like a
No.
real kind of magic
Cure sort of
for
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that might reduce symptoms, and I think things like kind of like over the counter medications are what are kind of recommended or prescribed. But this is one of the I think you know reasons why it's so important that research is done in this area because
Mm,
actually the treatment options are so limited, and it is a case of just kind of at the moment just kind of waiting for these things to ease off, which
mm.
understandably for some people is kind of not an acceptable route to go down.
Both of
No.
these are both fatigue and peripheral neuropathy are a real challenge for oncologists because
Mm,
you go to an oncologist to treat your cancer, and usually when you go to a doctor, you expect them to be able to help you with the side effects you have from that treatment. And one of the challenges for oncologists is they don't have the answers.
mm,
Yes, there is one drug that there is some amount of efficacy potentially that has been shown, but it's not routinely prescribed. With fatigue, there aren't any medications that you can really take for it. So that creates a situation where the oncologist wants to be able to prescribe something. They would love to be able to say,
yeah.
"Do this, and you'll be fine." But unfortunately, uh, they some oncologists don't want to talk about it because they don't have a solution for their
Mm,
patients, and that is challenging because oncologists want to help their
yeah.
patients.
Yeah.
Um, People who are receiving care for cancer want to have an answer and a way to improve, to reduce the amount of fatigue, to reduce their peripheral neuropathy, to improve the quality of the life they're
Mm.
living at the time. So it is an overall challenging situation. As Rosie Red highlighted, this is why we're passionate about doing research to be able to hopefully see benefits, direct benefits in people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Just goes to show how exercise or physical activity it just helps so many things. It's just amazing, isn't it, what it can help with.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not a question of, like we've said already, that it's very specific or very prescriptive exercise regimes or anything. It is just being more active. And I think what's really helpful, I hope what's been really helpful from sort of this session is knowing that there is research looking at it, and I know that might not be sort of helping people with their symptoms now, but knowing that this is taken seriously, like you say, the doctors do want to find something to help. You guys are doing this amazing research to understand more about it and find some solutions to it. I think as well, what can be really helpful is that sort of peer support, actually knowing I'm not alone with this. This is actually there's a whole community of people out there who feel exactly or very similar to the way I do. Um, and sharing sort of experiences and sharing what has helped and what hasn't helped just can help people feel just more empowered. Certainly through our services. So we've got something called Someone Like Me, where we can put someone in touch with someone else who's perhaps had similar chemotherapy, experiencing peripheral neuropathy or cancer-related fatigue for any reason. Like you say, John, it's any of the treat, and even the psychological impact of a cancer diagnosis is going to cause an element of uh, potentially huge element for some people of on fatigue. Um, We've also got something called Moving Forward, which is for people that have come to the end of their main hospital treatment, and it's either online or face to face, sort of in local communities, and it's again coming together with other women, having expert speakers talking about, and just actually people saying, "Oh, I've got that," and "Oh, I'm not the only one." Then it's not just me. We've got services for people that are living with secondary breast cancer, younger women, so under the age of 45, and obviously we've got our helpline that I mentioned earlier, and people are very welcome to ask our nurses any questions um, through our Ask Our Nurses service, which is sort of web submission form or our forums. But I think, yeah, having support to live with these potentially long term issues can really make a difference to how someone's sort of quality of life, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I think absolutely. I think one thing that I hear quite often in relation to peripheral neuropathy and cancer related fatigue is that it's almost kind of indescribable until you've like felt it yourself. So some of
Mm,
those services are going to be really powerful for that particular reason, because until you've experienced these symptoms and side effects, you won't kind of really know how that feels. So talking to someone in a similar position or has been in that same position, yeah, be amazing.
yeah.
And it's really great that the whole breast cancer community, breast cancer in particular, is very much just a sense of community, the sense
Mm,
of is we're all in it together, we're not alone, and I think that can be really powerful. All the women coming together in all over the UK and
mm,
supporting each other. And I think that's really important, that social interaction, that positive reinforcement, um, helping people deal with the distress they may feel if they have some of these symptoms, anxiety over them, and helping. I think that is really, really important, and very positive for them being able to address it in their daily lives.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think this is a really interesting topic, and I could go on all evening, but I think it might be quite a nice. That was quite a nice sort of way to end this session. So we are sort of coming to a close now. We're where are we? 7:40. So, like I say, if we haven't answered your questions, we'll post. I'll post a response tomorrow. Um, Again, very welcome to call our helpline. Any further follow up questions? If anyone's just more interested in about your research and the work you do, is there a way that we can perhaps what would be the best way for us to um, sort of share? Is it on your website, the study? Just I'm just thinking of people knowing more about the research that's going on, or any research really that's going on into these particular subjects.
Oh well, we could definitely provide with links to us at the university, and we can provide some information about the study that we are conducting
Hmm.
ourselves, and we could liaise with you about that so you can make it available.
Yeah.
Sure, that'd be really good, I think. So I'd like to thank you both for joining me this evening. It's been really helpful, and hopefully I certainly found it very interesting. So I'm sure it has been to the people that have been watching live, and the people that catch up with it on our YouTube channel. Just a reminder that we have got the survey that we'll be popping up with any feedback. Our next Facebook Live is on Tuesday, where we'll be actually talking more about those services I mentioned. We've actually got a dedicated session on the services that we offer, so there'll be more details about all of those. Also, our website. We do on the last Thursday of every month have a Q&A session with a couple of our nurses. So yeah, by all means, do tune in with that. And yeah, I just thanks very much, Rosie, and to you, John, and have a good evening, everybody. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.